Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive deep into Python data visualization. We're starting with the absolute basics and then building our way up to a really practical, professional-looking stacked bar chart, the kind that can tell a clear story with data. So whether you're just starting out or you want to sharpen your skills, you are in the right place. Let's get plotting. You know, this quote really hits the nail on the head. It gets to the very heart of why we even bother visualizing data. I mean, sure, you can have a table just packed with numbers, but let's be honest, our brains aren't really built to spot patterns in a spreadsheet at a single glance. A chart, though, that tells a story, instantly. It's all about turning that raw data into actual insight.
And here's a perfect example. Just look at this. On the left, you've got the raw data. It's kind of just a jumble of numbers and text. To figure anything out, you'd have to read every single line. But on the right, with that same data visualized, boom! The insight is immediate. You can see right away which bar is the tallest. That's the takeaway, and it just jumps right out at you. That's the power we're going to tap into.
So how do we actually make these things in Python? Well, our journey starts with the absolute bedrock of Python plotting, Matplotlib. And why Matplotlib? Because it's incredibly powerful and flexible. It gives us total control over every little detail of our visuals, which makes it the essential toolkit for any kind of serious data viz.
And this right here, this is step one, always. This one line of code, import matplotlib.pyplot as PLT, is pretty much your ticket to the show. You're basically telling Python, hey, I need my main plotting tools, and let's just call them PLT for short. Think of it like setting up your digital easel in Canvas before you start painting. Okay, so before we build our more complex chart, we've got to understand the basic building blocks. And the good news is, almost everything you'll ever need to do can be covered by just three foundational chart types.
First up, we've got the line plot. This one's super simple. If you have data that changes over time or any continuous interval, think stock prices or daily temperatures, a line plot is your best friend. It just connects the dots and shows you the trend.
Next, the scatter plot. This one is perfect when you're trying to see if there's a connection between two different things. You know, like, is there a relationship between how many hours you study and your final test score? A scatter plot will show you the pattern, or maybe even the lack of one.
And finally, the bar chart. This is the go-to tool when you need to compare separate, distinct groups, like sales numbers across different products. And this is the one we're going to be focusing on and building on for our main example.
All right, with those fundamentals covered, it's time for the main event. We're going to take that simple bar chart concept and really level it up. We're going to stack data to create a much richer, way more informative visual, and we're going to use a real-world data set to do it. So here's our mission. We've got data on the average SAT scores for 5 public schools in New York City. Now, for each school, there are 3 parts to that score: math, reading, and writing. Our goal is to plot these not next to each other, but stacked right on top of each other. That way, we can see both the individual parts and the total score for every school, all in one chart. And we're going to do this in 3 really simple steps. First, we'll just create a totally normal bar chart for the math scores. That's going to be our base layer. Then, we'll plot the reading scores right on top of that. And finally, we'll add the writing scores to complete the whole stack. So how does Python actually know how to stack these bars? Well, the secret is a single, super powerful little argument, the bottom parameter. It's a really simple instruction. Instead of telling a bar to start at the 0 line, you tell it exactly which bar to start on top of. It's the whole key to stacking. And it works just like this. For our second layer, the reading scores, we just tell Matplotlib, bottom equals math scores. It's that direct. The new bars now start from the very top of the math bars. Then, for the last layer, the writing scores, we just stack it on top of both of the previous ones by setting the bottom to the sum of the math and the reading scores. That one little command is what unlocks this entire technique.
Okay, so we've built the structure of our chart, but plotting the data is really only half the battle. A raw, unformatted plot is, well, it's usually pretty ugly and not clear enough to show anyone. Now comes the really crucial step, adding those finishing touches to make it look professional and be easy to understand.
So here's a classic problem you're going to run into probably immediately. Our data has these long school names, and when you try to plot them as labels on the x-axis, they all just crash into each other and become this unreadable mess. It's really frustrating, right? But it's a super common issue.
Luckily, Python has a simple, really elegant solution built right in. The text wrap library is designed to do exactly what it sounds like. It takes a long piece of text and just wraps it into a neat multi-line paragraph. It is the perfect tool for our messy label problem.
Let's look at the actual code that makes all the magic happen. First, plt.title gives our chart a nice, clear title. Obvious, but important. Then, plt.xlabel and plt.ylabel label our axes so everyone knows what they're looking at. And finally, the solution to our big problem. We use plt.xticks to place our labels, but we pass in our school names only after running them through textwrap.wrap. This automatically breaks those long names into clean, easy-to-read labels. These are the little lines of code that make a huge difference.
All right, let's see what happens when we put all these pieces together. This is where we go from just a confusing jumble of bars to a clear, compelling story that's told through data. And here it is. The transformation is pretty dramatic. On the left, that's our raw plot. I mean, it's functional, but it's messy and it's unprofessional. On the right is our final product. With just those few lines of formatting code, we've got a clear title, labeled axes, and perfectly readable school names. It's now a chart that actually tells a story effectively.
So let's just recap the big takeaways here. First, always remember those 3 core chart types. Whether you're showing a trend, a relationship, or a comparison, the line, scatter, and bar plots are your foundational toolkit.
And second, if you remember one thing about stacked charts, make it this: the bottom parameter. That is the key that unlocks the whole thing. By telling each new layer exactly where to start, you can build these incredibly informative visuals piece by piece.
So, we've covered the why, the how, and the polish. You now have the tools to go way beyond simple plots and create visuals that can really communicate complex information. So the only question left is, what data do you have and what story is it waiting to tell? Now go find out.